before you record, I just want to.
Oh,
Never mind.
honey.
Sorry, I already rested.
She was trying to
Never
talk.
mind.
I
It's
forgot.
fine. I'll just
I'm
text
sorry,
you.
Mel.
Okay.
She was
Sorry
trying
about
to
that.
say something.
Sorry about that. I had already realized like starting to press it. Anyway, the first thing I wanted to go over is I was mentioning that we were going to go over anything I left out last meeting for sliders. And one thing I forgot to mention is there are sliders. It's not just the ones where you push it from the camera side to side. There's also some that come with this little crank that allows you to you just twist the crank on the side, and that allows the camera to go back and forth on the slider with that little pulley system, if you see it in the middle right there. So it's just like a little rubber band pulley thing that you put in the middle, and it allows it to go from side to side whenever you're twisting that thing, which can make it a lot more consistent with how fast or how slow the movement is. And then typically speaking, when you buy one like that, they usually have some kind of adapters that you can add on to it to have it be an automatic mechanized version, because it's just using that pulley system, but it's going to be an automatic mechanized version of the same slider. So if you are looking into getting a slider, they are more expensive when they come with the pulley system and all that, but it does allow you to adapt it most of the time to an automatic mechanized one later if you choose. So that's something to also consider when you're talking about sliders. Everything else is pretty much what I already went over last Monday, or this Monday, I mean. So there's nothing else really to say as far as sliders go on that. Moving on, I'm going to talk about light stands today. Light stands, pretty much, we're just talking about the standard light stand, some that you might get in like a package when you get any kind of light. Sometimes you can buy like a studio package that comes with a few light stands, a few soft boxes, and things like that. And these ones, there's not too much to consider. I mean, like they are a lot different compared on which one you get. But if you're trying to get like really sturdy ones, then these ones are sometimes not the best, because especially not the cheaper end of these, because they just can't handle as much weight. If you are getting like way more professional, usually what happens is you end up getting C stands. But the reason why you might get these instead is some of these are very sturdy and they can handle the heavier lights. They're just going to be more expensive, but they're still going to be the same shape and size as these kinds. They are just lighter weight, and that might be why you choose to get these instead of getting the C stands. They can also usually break down and compact a little, not break down, but they can usually compact a little bit further down than the C stands can. And so it saves some extra space. So they're really a lot better for travel, and they're just a lot better for carrying it around if you are moving it all over the place. If you're going to go to an outdoor spot in the park or something and you're not going to be carrying it with you, then you might choose to go with one of these instead of a C stand. But if you're doing something that needs a little bit more of a robust light, and you want to have you have like a studio space, or like you just have a home space that you're using where you're not really going to be moving it around as much, it's not really for travel, C stands is usually what you want to go with if you're going to get the higher end version of these kind of stands, because they typically fall around somewhere around the same price. I mean, the higher end of these might go up to like 100, and the lower end you can get them for like $20, but those are the ones that are really, really cheap and probably going to break apart. With the C stands, they can be 140 to a few hundred. So it just depends on how much you're willing to get into and how much you're willing to invest as well. But that is something to think about whenever you're talking about more professionalized stuff. It just usually tends to go towards the C stand, because they can also do a few more things that a regular light stand can't, with that extension arm that they're made for. So have that arm extend out and put something on it, or have a duvetine or diffusion material, or holding up a reflector, or holding up a light. So they can typically do a few more things and a little bit more versatile when you have a studio situation. So with these standard light stands, one of the things you might want to consider is if they have an air cushion. So whenever you are separating the different sections, extending it out or contracting it in, when you're contracting it, if you just let it go, some of them will have an air cushion where it actually slows down a bit before contracting all the way. And that'll just help it if you accidentally let it go and you didn't know it was loose and there's a light on it. It'll give it a little bit more of a cushion so that it doesn't smack together and maybe make your light fall off or make it fall over the whole stand. And it just gives it a little bit more safety so that that stuff doesn't happen. It has a little bit more of a buffer before something breaks or something gets ruined. And you also don't want those sections smacking together really hard anyway, even if there's nothing on it, just because the more you use it, the more wear and tear it's going to have. And if it just keeps smacking together constantly, eventually it's going to be more likely to break. So the first thing you want to look at is maybe if it has an air cushion, it'll last a bit longer. Or, some of them have springs, but the air cushions typically tend to be better in these just for how they work. Another thing some of these kinds of stands do, which I couldn't really find a picture of it, but when you fold them down, they're pretty flat. And some of them have like a little side section where you can connect them together. So if you have a multiples of these, if you have like 5 or 6 and you don't have much space, then what's this called, nesting? Getting some that can nest together is really good because you can compact them down. And then you can basically connect them together so they stand all as one and they're easy to just come out. It's kind of like putting those chairs up that you'll find in like those foldable chairs in an auditorium or something. Once you stack them together, they all stand up as one. And it's kind of like that. You can just nest them together and put them all together so they're a little bit more compact and they stand up and they're less likely to fall over because they're all together. Another thing you always want to think about when you're talking about any kind of light stands or anything like that is the materials that the stuff's made out of. These ones, especially on the cheaper end, the very cheaper end, they typically are made out of plastic and very thin metal that will bend if you hit into it the wrong way. So on the very cheaper end, like the $20, $15 ones, they're very easy to get bent and very easy to break apart because they're just made out of cheap metal and cheap plastic. And the other thing about the really cheap ones is whenever they have those locking mechanisms and things like that, they don't often work as well as the more expensive ones. Like they can't hold up as much weight. So whenever you're trying to lock it, you're twisting the thing to make it lock, or you're using the little latch, but you have something heavy on it. It doesn't really hold it up as well. So it kind of just sinks down and contracts back together anyway. So you really want to make sure that whichever one you're buying is going to be able to handle the kind of lights, the kind of weight that you're using for it. And of course, whenever you get the more expensive ones, the materials typically are a lot better. It's usually a lot more material is usually a lot more metal, and they're a little bit heavier, which makes them more sturdy as well. And so you typically want to look into something like that. Another thing you want to think about is the same thing like with tripods and those other things that we've looked at, is how far they can compress down, how much they can compress down into like a small little items for carrying and for travel, or just for space. And then how far it can extend outward, how high it can go. Because some of them, the more expensive ones typically tend to be bigger whenever you compact them down. They are still pretty big compared to the cheaper ones, which can compact down really small and really light, but they're also are a lot more lightweight, which makes them less sturdy. So it's a kind of a trade-off between those two things. And of course, the payload or weight capacity it's able to handle. Always check that out. Make sure you think about your lights and any accessories that's going to go on it. Or if you want to future-proof it and you're thinking about getting new lights, how much do those weigh? And is this kind of stand going to be good for that? These stands are really good for small lights, little pocket-sized lights and things like that that you might get that just to do some really quick lighting setups, but they're not as good for the big bulky stuff that you'll see, like you'll use on like a film production set. And they're definitely not as good for like HMIs or a big, huge lights like that. Like I don't even know if they can handle those because they're so big. So that's something to consider. What kind of light are you using? How much does it weigh? And is it extending out one way or another? Soft boxes tend to stick out towards that direction. So how heavy is your soft box? Because it's going to be putting more weight towards whatever side you're putting it on. And you just don't want it to fall over and either break or just ruin the shot. Another thing you want to see whenever you're talking about these kinds of light stands is how far the legs can spread, how wide it gets whenever the legs are fully spread out. The wider it goes, the more sturdy the thing's going to be, and the lower that the thing might be able to get to the ground. But the narrower that goes, then that means that it might not be able to be as sturdy, not as stable, and it's going to be harder, but it'll also be easier to fit in small locations. The other thing about like the wide legs is if you do need to fully extend it out, it might take up a lot more space and be more of a tripping hazard. So those are some things to consider when you're talking about that, but it will also give you that more stability for whatever you're putting on it. Another thing you might want to consider, some of these now come with like 1 or 2 legs that can go up and down compared to the other ones. So if you need to put it in like a weird location or like on one of those spots that has one step, you can adjust one of the legs so that it's 1 step up while the other ones are on the step that's down. Or other thing. Actually, this picture shows it. All the way to the right, there's those white steps, and it's putting the 3rd leg on there. So that's something you might want to consider if you're looking to get one of these. That's just makes it more versatile in different situations. And a lot easier to adjust it compared to like having to figure out like how far to extend the leg, I guess. And then that could also be bad for stability. So something you might want to look into. Then there's also, if it has, some of these have these little, I don't know, I guess you call it a spigot, the little metal parts on top. Some of these are like attached to it. It can't come out depending on what the price is. The cheaper ones usually have it already pre-attached where you can't remove it, but having it be removable and putting it in a different direction will give you more versatility in how to place your light. So that is something to look into. Also, you might want to put an adapter in it, or you might want to switch it out with something else so that it's not that little tiny screw, but it's something a little bigger. If you have a bigger light or something that needs a different size, then it might be more beneficial to take the thing out. It also kind of helps just a little bit with travel because you save maybe an inch or 2 by taking it off. So if you really need that space, you can take it off and put it somewhere else. And then it's a little bit shorter. And then the other thing you want to look at is if it has the little latches or if it has the screw to do the different sections. Some of them have like the twisting where you turn it and to lock it in, and then you then you turn it the opposite way to unlock it, so that you either loosen it to extend it or retract it, and then you lock it in place by twisting it. The other ones have the little latches where you just press it down and then unfold it, and it locks in place that way. Like I said earlier, it depends on how expensive it is. The more expensive it is, those are going to be better at keeping it in the exact place you put it. But the very cheap end, I know from experience that they don't lock very well, especially over time. The more you use them, the cheaper ones will start to slide even after you try to lock it in place, just because whatever mechanism they're using to lock it isn't working as well as it used to, and it just can't handle it the same way. So, but the ones that twist, typically on the cheaper ones, are a bit better because then you can really tighten it as much as you want to, compared to the latches, which are a little bit worse for the cheaper ones because you have no, you can't really control how tight it gets or how loose it is. It's just already pre-made with the thing. But with the twistable one, you can twist it even tighter and try to get it really tight as if you were doing a screw. So it's a bit better for the cheaper ones. But for the more expensive ones, it's better to have the latches because they just save a bit of time. You don't have to twist and unscrew it and all that. It's just easier to flip it off and then push it back down to tighten it. I recommend checking out, there's this Premium Beats has a post about light stands, and they go through and show a bunch of the different kinds, and they show some of the differences. So if you're looking to buy light stands, particularly like some of these kinds, they go through a lot. Some are called preemie stands, some are called low boy, baby stands, combo stands, and they kind of get sturdier and show which ones are the best. The low boys and the baby stands, they showed some of them are made out of like metal, like full on metal. Every single piece is metal. So it's like a lot better than a standard light stand, which is pretty much just made out of that black cheap metal that can bend very easily. But they are more expensive because of it. But they're still in the same kind of shape as these. And then baby stands and combo stands allow you to, they extend, some extend up to like 9 and 10 feet, and they can still handle very heavy weight. And so those are the ones you might use if you are wanting a little bit lighter weight and a little more compactability than you would get with a C stand, but you still want that professional weight where you can use a larger light that is more, it requires a heavier, stabler stand. You would get something maybe like a baby stand or a combo stand. I definitely recommend checking their website out. The link to it is in the syllabus. I think it is, let me check. Yeah, letter G, Premium Beat. Oh shoot, I didn't want to do that. There we go. Premium Beat, Practical Guide Light Stands. That's the name of their blog for that. And they have a few videos which they're showing the actual differences. So if you're looking to buy a light stand like that, then that is the website I most recommend because it was just easiest to follow and had the most descriptive details of all the differences. Does anyone have any questions or comments? So some of the brands you might get for a light stand is Manfrotto, Impact, Matthews, and Newer. Those are some of the most popular ones for those kinds of light stands.
Yeah, these stands are pretty cool. Especially the more heavy duty ones. You'll see a lot of lights now products, you'll buy a lighting kit and they'll sell you these light stands that come with it that are like really, really cheap and flimsy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually just replace them with the more expensive, more heavy duty ones. I feel a lot more comfortable with, being on those than the ones that actually come with the lights. But it's a good alternative to just having C stands. Not saying that, you should just go out and buy them and not have C stands. It's just for people like me, like the last meeting I mentioned that I just have my car, which is a 4-door sedan. So like carrying around a bunch of C stands just isn't ideal for me. So like this is like the better alternative, especially now that most lighting is like kind of like shifting over from the big clunky production spotlights and tungsten lights, and now we have these LED lights that can replicate like something similar. It's not perfect. We're not there yet where we have like an all-in-one light, but yeah, things are getting more and more compact lighting wise. So just your basic 4x4 light panel or LED panel doesn't really require a C stand. I mean, of course, the C stand would probably be the the ultimate form of having a stand, but these work just as good for that type of stuff. So like if you are shooting on a budget where you have LED lights, small compact LED lights, these will work perfect for it, as opposed to having a C stand for every light,
Right.
for
Yeah.
the smallest light. Yeah, so these are definitely beneficial, and I use them a lot too. I use them for my client monitor as well. I use that, just for a client monitor to put it on there. It works fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and it definitely just depends mainly on like the weight of the light and what kind of light you're using for it. Because if you look at the picture here, like it's all made out of metal. That's that baby stand I was talking about. And so those are the ones that are a lot better than just like a regular standard film stand that you'll get. I mean, a light stand that you'll get with the kind of kits. Raphael said, could you expand on a bit on lighting kits? Lighting kits basically just have, if you buy, a lighting kit, you would get maybe a few soft boxes, a few light stands, and everything that comes like in the bag. And like basically it's just everything you need for that specific kind of light all together, so that you can have the stand with the light fixture that you're going to put on it that has the power, whether it's battery powered or you just plug it into a wall, and then the kind of light, the bag, so that you can put it all together in a bag. So that's kind of what a lighting kit would be. And of course,
Yeah.
there's other ones that have more or less accessories and things like that, but that's the basic of it.
Yeah. The variations differ from like what you want. Like once again, another company is Newer. They make like different kind. I mean, there's all kinds of kits you can get, but there's the Airy kit, the Pepper kit, but now, like, that's when I was coming up, those were the kits you can get, but those are like super expensive. With the now, like, we have like this affordable low budget thing where they'll give you like, they'll try to give you like, depending on what your needs are, like if you're a run and gun, they'll give you two LED panels, two light stands, and that's it. Or if you're like more serious, they'll give you 3 or 4 lights for a 3-point lighting setup and stuff like that. And different lights, like a spotlight from Aperture might come with a light stand, but the more expensive light just comes with the light itself, and they're expecting you to have your own stands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Especially the more heavier ones, like they're just like, they're expecting you to have your own stands. And some lights are like, well, you gotta put it on a C stand, so like they're expecting you to have it. But then other kits will give you like, the stands are included, but it's a lot of times with the stands that come with the lights, in my experience, specifically on the cheaper light, those stands really aren't the best. So I usually just end up like just getting my own stands, and then I'll try to find a kit that doesn't include stands, because it'll just be just a big waste, in my opinion. You could save some money too. You don't have to necessarily buy the whole entire kit. You can just buy a couple of the lights. But like for people just starting out, they'll sell like an option to buy a kit. It's mainly a lot for like video bloggers and stuff, people that like to light their own setup and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's like different amounts of things that'll come in the kit. Like some are, if you look up here, like some they'll sell a few different kinds of lights with the stands and then maybe a green screen with the bag. And then some will just sell like a few lights together and call that the kit. And some will sell some gels with the lights, with the stands and the bag or Pelican case or something. So it just depends on the price you're willing to pay for it. And it'll tell you what all comes with it. But there's so many different kinds out there, so many different variations on what comes with it, what doesn't, even from the same company, that you just have to like, it's kind of like buying a new car where you get to choose all the different features that go on it, except for it's just you're choosing all of the different pieces that go in your light kit when you buy it. And the more you add to it, the more expensive it gets. All right. Moving on. Now we're talking about continuity editing, graphic, rhythmic, spatial, and temporal relations. And I had left this for later in the syllabus because I thought it was going to be something a lot more complex than what it is. Typically what it is pretty much all the stuff we've already been learning this semester and what we've already
Just in
learned.
more complicated and bougie words.
More of an academic way of saying these same things that we've already learned about is basically what it is.
Really annoying.
Continuity editing is just paying attention to editing with continuity in mind. While you're editing, you make sure that the continuity is matching up. And so,
Yeah, some of the videos made it seem like it was this completely different thing. And I was like, it's basically just editing with continuity in mind. It's not like this other thing. I don't know. It's a little frustrating. Some of these videos just made the concept seem a lot more complex than they needed to be, and just used words like temporal, whatever the crap, just to talk about proper timing while editing. I was like, why do you have to word it like that? Why do you have to explain it like that? You're just trying to make it seem more complicated than it is, or more complex than it is. And yeah, it was.
like I said, it's just academic way. It's just the academic way and the academic terms for these same things we've already been learning. Continuity editing, you're just maintaining and preserving the continuity within the scene, making sure that if somebody's doing an action, if they're taking off something, if they're putting it over, if they're throwing a ball, it's not going to appear back in their hand for their next shot that you cut to. Their cup of water, if you're paying attention to it, if that's the most important thing, like after you do emotional editing and all of that, making sure the emotion's in the scene, then you try to pay attention to the continuity, making sure that that water level stays the same. It's not jumping all over the place, being filled and being empty from one take to the next, or being half empty and all that. And it's just making sure that the characters are in the same spots. Someone's not all of a sudden 3 feet to the left because they turned around in one take and you're cutting from 2 different takes. So that person is now somewhere else when they're using that line, when they're saying their line. So it's just things like that. That's what continuity editing is, just making sure that the continuity lines up, paying attention to the continuity while you are editing. That's establishing shots, shot reverse shots, the 180-degree rule. Remember, just making sure that you stay on that side so that if you're looking at the picture, the red character is always going to be on the left side of the screen, whether we are looking over the shoulder of the blue character or looking over the shoulder of the red character. The red character stays on the left side of screen. They're just smaller or larger in the frame. Compared to if you went to the other side, like with this camera up on top, you would see that now the blue character is on the left side of screen. And you only want to do that if it's intentional. You don't want to accidentally do the 180-degree line and cut it. So hopefully the people on set were paying attention and doing their job and making sure that they didn't break that 180-degree line. But if they did, you want to make sure that you don't use that take unless it's absolutely necessary, because no other performance or no other emotion comes through on a different take. But yeah, basically the 180-degree rule, we've already gone over it, but it's just making sure that everything lines up. The character that's red is going to be looking off to the right of screen. And so it's going to look like they're looking towards character blue, which is on the right side of screen. And character blue is going to be looking to the left side of screen, and we want to make sure that the red character is on the left side of screen so it looks like they're looking at each other when we're cutting back and forth to them. So that's the other thing about continuity editing, is just making sure that the eye line matches. So the rule down there, if you look down there, says eye line match. That's what that means. Wherever the character is looking, it looks like we are looking where they are looking whenever we cut to the next shot. Matching on action, we've already talked about that. That is whenever someone's getting ready to get up. If they're out of their seat and you cut to the next shot, they should be out of their seat. That way the action matches, and they're not sitting down again, getting ready to get up, unless you're intentionally going back a few frames or a few seconds to show that action again, which you'll see in a lot of movies when they do explosions. That's not really continuity editing, because they keep going back in time a bit to show the explosion from different angles. Whereas continuity tries to keep the flow of time going pretty much, and they try to make it seem like everything is happening continuously. It's a continuous scene, which is where the continuity part comes in. The other thing about continuity editing with the eye line match is wherever the character looks, the next shot we cut to, we just assume that we are looking where the character was looking, or we're looking at what the character looked at. Character looks down and they see, and then we cut to a bug. We're going to assume that the character looked at the bug. We're not going to assume we're somewhere else and the character just looked at the ground. So all of that is what continuity editing is. It's pretty much, I mean, what we've been learning this whole semester is pretty much what it is. Spatial relations. So when you're talking about spatial, when they talk about graphic, rhythmic, spatial, and temporal relations, spatial relations is talking about that 180-degree rule. It's best maintained when the camera doesn't break it. That way the characters stay on the right and left side, and everybody stays within that same space. So the space where we assume that they are in, the character's looking from left to right. We're assuming the other character is on the right. And then we see that because they're on screen right. And so the space is the same. The space of that room, the space of the characters, it all stays the same. Graphic relations, that's just the relation between the two shots, which is like basically just the picture relation, whatever's in the actual picture. It's the relation between those two. So it could be shapes, color, lines, movement. So whenever you're doing a match cut, when you're cutting from a apple to something that looks like an apple in the next take, that would be a graphic relation because they are the same shape or the same color. And so that's it. It's just what the look of the thing is, the actual picture itself matches. And the relation, or it could be the exact opposite. They could be different.
How would you use that term in context?
What term?
Graphic relations.
In context of
Like in the context of like what situation would you use that term? Can you give an example of where that term would be inserted into a sentence when trying to communicate?
When you are at school. That's pretty much the only time I could think. I was like, when it's just the academic way of saying match cut, or saying that two things, you're trying to show an idea.
So you're saying that it doesn't happen in post-production, you're saying then?
I've never heard of it. So that's why I thought it was going to be something
Honestly,
more complex.
I don't think that's the case. I think it's just another word for match cut and other stuff like that. I just think that they're trying to complicate things, or use a more technical term, I suppose.
That's
what it
is.
Sound
it's
more
a more
professional.
technical, academic. It's academically correct because
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, but can you
graphically.
use it in a sentence?
I mean, no.
Honey, you can use it in a sentence, basically. Like, but it's in an academic way. Like when they're talking about it, you just switch match cut with that word and boom. Like she was wording it.
No, you can't.
Stupidly. Not match cut exactly, but I don't know. She worded it in a really stupid way that I was even confused. And I was like, wait, is she talking about? And Coda had to explain it to me. It's like, oh, why is she saying it like that?
Like, would you say like, oh, can you edit this to match the graphic relations from this cut with this cut? Is that
You'll
how
never
you use
hear
the
that.
term?
Then
Then what's the point?
If the person's really douchey.
Right.
If the person's
That's
really
what I'm saying. Like
douchey
it's already
enough
stuff
to
that
word
we've learned. It makes it seem like it's more complex than it is. That's it.
But honey,
Like
did you
the graphic
understand what she
relation
was
is just
saying?
the relation between the two pictures. So it's like whenever you're doing a match cut, you obviously try to match it as close to as possible to the
Find
shape.
the graphic relation between these images or something like that. I guess that's how you would use it in a sentence.
Or you would say like I want there to be graphic relations between these shots.
Yeah,
Match
I
cut.
think that makes sense. Honey, she's asking how would you use that term in a
Like,
sentence?
what's the point of teaching someone a term if they can't use it?
That's what school is.
That's exactly
Film
what,
school.
what Coda and my argument was, because it's like no one uses that. Maybe in an academic field, like maybe when you're studying it, or maybe back in the day, it was used. But I've never heard that term before, except for that video when she was talking about it in like a classroom academic.
She's
type
called
of
it a
way.
graphic match, which is what we know as a match cut. So it's the same thing. If somebody's saying they want a
Well,
graphic
but-
relation, then
well,
they just want a match cut.
yes,
Like, look at the picture.
but-
It's two different scenes, but it's the dissolve between those, and they say that's their graphic relation. It's just the way
Yeah,
it's just the picture, and their relation to each other is that they
but
are
you're
in
not
the same
seeing a cut.
composition
Like
and
the
framing.
cut is not included in that, and for good reason, because it's not talking about it cutting. It's just talking about how they relate to each other.
I mean, basically what she's saying is they relate to each other and therefore you're going to put them together. So it is in a way cutting. It's just cutting scenes together, right? That's what I understood.
So basically, I think the way I understand it is that, let's say if you have a shape, like in this case, I think you have this window in the back, right? And the subject is in the foreground. So if the subject moves, so you go from one cut to another cut. If you put the subject in a completely different background, that would be a mismatch on the cuts, right? So that's going to confuse the viewer, or the audience, to basically geographical location is different. So you want to maintain that shape in the background to resemble the next match cut that you would do. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a disorientation of the location that you're associating the subject with.
Yeah, like I said, it's pretty much just the
I have a question.
So is this term only? I'm sorry. Go on.
No, I was just going to ask, Brian, you've been to film school. Have you ever heard this crap before?
No, I have not.
Thank you. Okay. That was my point. I had never heard of this crap in my life. I think it's just a bougie word to talk about, or a bougie way of explaining cutscenes together in a way that makes sense.
But the thing is, like, you can use. I think it also means like basically like visual parallels, which doesn't necessarily have to be things that are cut right after, like from one shot to the next shot. Like lots of movies and shows have visual parallels episodes apart where they're like calling back to things.
Okay, so it might mean something else. The point that I'm trying to make is that it's stupid, it's unnecessary, it's bougie and it's
All right,
it
well,
sounds
here's one,
pretentious.
like a graphic relation you might see. You might have seen this. What is it called? Kuleshov effect or whatever, where he shows the same person and they show a different image, and then they say, okay, what is that guy thinking? If you just look at that top row, it's him, it's a bowl of soup, it's him again. And the people go, oh, well, he must be hungry. And then they show that same thing, him, a dead little kid, him. Oh, well, he's really sad about his kid dying. Him, this woman laying on a couch, him. Well, he's in love with her. Even though it's the same exact shot, it's the same exact facial expression, there's nothing going on. That's the
Facial
graphic
expression,
relation
hun.
between them because we kind of infer it as an audience. So that's
Yeah.
another way to look at it.
But the shapes are varying, right? The shapes are varying in this.
Yeah, this isn't a match cut. This is nothing like a match cut.
Okay,
Right.
fine. Forget I said match cut. It's just a cut.
Look, the
No,
relation
but it's
between
not
two
about the
shots,
cutting.
which
It's
is the
about the
picture
yeah,
relation.
the
It could be a
relationship
Yes,
shape,
between
call
color,
it.
lines,
It's the
movement.
relation. Read it again, honey. Say it again.
A graphic relation, the relation between two shots, which is the picture relation, could be shapes, color, lines, or movement. Used anytime you're creating a match cut, or used to show similarities, opposites in the imagery, or showing the idea of two things connecting or opposing each other.
For me, that sounds like cutting, but that's just my interpretation.
It's it's
It might
about
not-
the
it might be more than
visuals.
Yeah, no, I know, but I just mean like in my brain, the way that I understood it is, it's how the visuals connect together to say something or to represent something.
That's a composition.
Ah,
Visual
screw it.
composition.
I don't care.
I mean, you're
Listen,
not wrong.
guys,
I'm not saying
that's
you're
what I'm
wrong.
saying. The main thing about all this was just that we've already learned it all. This is just like the way they're doing it is just a more complex way of.
You're,
Yeah, basically
you're-
this is the theory. It's like film theory. talk.
Yes. They're trying to screw with our heads, basically. No, I'm kidding.
Because there's also what's called rhythmic relations, which is just the
Yeah.
shot's durations. So it's just the rhythm of the scene, how fast or
So
how
yeah,
slow
I think it
Pacing.
is.
those
Yeah, I
shots are.
think
Yeah,
no,
pacing,
exactly,
rhythm.
pacing.
So it's whenever
So
they
no,
speed
you're
up, they
right.
slow
It's
down, but
more-
that's their rhythmic relation to each other. One might be slower than the other, or they might be the same speed. I mean, that's it. Spatial
Mel worded
relations,
it-
relationship between space from shot to shot. The best example is an establishing shot of a building. And then the next shot, we are in a room. So we automatically assume that the room is inside that building we saw before. Spatial relations. Where are we? What space is this?
I think Mel worded it really well when she explained it more as a like film theory. I think that's the best way to explain it. It's basically taking these things that we use in film and breaking them down or explaining them, their relation to each other, what they do, all that kind of stuff. The
Yeah,
emotions they provoke.
this is a very conceptual over practice
Yes.
kind of conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Like it's not as it's like a more it's complex, it's overly convoluted on how complex it is because
It's like someone
doesn't
looking at
matter.
a painting. It's like someone looking at a painting and instead of talking about how beautiful the lines are or how colorful it is, they're like, what is the emotion this is trying to portray? And what is the relation between this color and that color? And I don't know. I love film and I do believe it's an art form, but I do feel like some people can go a little overboard in their over breakdown of it, or can maybe want to break things down in a more complex way that sometimes is very good for us to understand why an emotion provokes us or how to create a certain emotion, how to evoke a certain feeling, how to create suspense, etc. And sometimes I think it's just overcomplicating something that doesn't need to be. Does that make sense?
It really depends on what context you're in.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like it can do both.
I don't know. I would say it doesn't really have too much practical use. It does
It
not.
doesn't
really-
have, it doesn't have necessarily have practically, I don't know. Yeah, it seems like it's more for people who are breaking down films that already exist than for people who are making films.
Yeah, it's more to understand why those those particular shots or breakdowns or cuts give us those emotions, create those images, that kind of thing is how
Yeah.
I see it.
The graphic
Which
relations
there's-
on the top of this right here, you can see it's match cuts like we've saw before. That is what they say. Yeah, it says rhythmic relations down here, but I watched this video. She's talking about graphic relations at the top, and then she goes on to rhythmic relations, but she doesn't really show that. She just explains it. So basically, like, graphic relations can be a match cut. It doesn't have to be just a match cut, but every match cut is going to have a graphic relation because you are trying to, unless it's an audio match cut where you're matching the audio together. If you're matching any kind of picture, it's going to be it's going to have a graphic relation to each other because you're trying to match it together. That was my point I was trying to make earlier. And anyway.
Yeah, you're trying to connect ideas
Right.
with
Through
visuals.
either their shape, their color, or their
I will
framing,
say,
the way they
I'm
look.
pretty sure if you go to film school, you will have a film theory class. I might be wrong, Brian, correct me on that. But if you did have a film theory class, did you run into any of these terms as well or no?
I mean, we had there was the history of film, then there was art history. You might have heard this term in art history, but nobody paid attention in that class because it was boring.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can understand. I can appreciate that there is a place for it and there is a discussion for it. I just know that if someone is asking me to edit something in a particular way and uses any of these words, I'm going to roll my eyes. Because that's not where you would use them. You would use them in a conversation about film theory, but not in an actual, like, explaining to me how to edit a shot or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just, if you're dissing it so much, why did you include it?
Because it was there and we had to touch on
go
it.
over what it is. Plus, I'm not dissing it as much as Priscilla is.
No,
I was just
he's
saying,
not.
like, I just think it's a more convoluted. I just think it's a little more complicated than it needs to be. It's explained in a way that it doesn't really need to be explained. It's like overly complicated just because. That is my personal view on it. It doesn't mean I don't think it's
And
relevant
I don't mean
at
to
all.
bash it. Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's irrelevant either. I think there's a place for it. I just, like Coda said, I also have that pet peeve when people in a certain industry, and this can happen, especially when it comes to art, use some of these words to make things seem more complex, more bougie than it is. And like Raphael said, a little snobby. So it just kind of gave me those vibes because the way that the video was explained at first made sense. And I was like, okay, yeah, I understand that. But then they went into like such an explanation of it that was more their theory of the emotion and everything created than anything else. And I was kind of like, okay, now I feel like you're reaching a little bit, or like that we're just having a debate on the philosophy of film or something like
You're
that.
not big on philosophy.
I love philosophy, but there's a place for it. And I don't think when we're, and I think that is more of a conversation about like emotions and what do you think of this, of how this creates that and that kind of thing, as opposed to what we were trying to learn is like how to do it, why we do it, and more of like a breakdown as opposed to an in-depth philosophical debate. Does that make sense?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm bashing it.
Yeah, anyway, I mean, like I said, like, it's not really practical of use, which is I usually try to stick to practical. I just thought this stuff was going to be something else than what it was, because I had never heard of it. So I wasn't sure how complicated it actually was. But if you think about it in terms of what we've already learned, it's pretty simple to understand what it is.
Yeah, like with what you have up on the screen, I do think they could use more clear language. Like, I don't know why they use the word perceivers instead of audience.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That is
Right.
exactly what I'm saying. It just sounds like they're trying to be pretentious at that point. And like, I'm
Right.
smarter
So
than you and I
temporal
know.
relations, the last thing on this, we already went over rhythmic. That's just how fast or how slow the actual shot durations are, causing the rhythm and the pacing of the scene or the film as a whole. Graphic, as in they can be, you can show similarities or dissimilarities to one thing to another, or show two shots in conjunction, which will give the audience a different, they'll perceive it differently because they'll think that they go together. That Kuleshov effect, where he shows a bowl of soup and they go, well, that guy's hungry, when all he's doing is just making a face. He's not even making he's not looking
If I
hungry.
can
He's
say
not
one more
making any
thing,
kind of
honey.
emotion.
If I
Temporal
can say
relation.
one,
Wait,
honey.
temporal relations is the relationship of time between shots. It could be used in flashbacks, flash forwards. You could freeze the frame. You could use slow motion. All those things would be considered a temporal relation, and because it's just about time and how fast or how slow you make it. Yes, honey.
Sorry, if I can say one more thing. I do really love one of the things that I think that is why I'm so passionate about this is because I feel like film and these types of art are such interesting mediums, how we can make people feel things and create something really cool, both technical and artistic. And I think that when people break it down like this in a very complex manner, I feel like it makes things seem less attainable or less or like, oh, you won't be able to get this, you won't be able to understand this, when it's human emotion and it's pacing and it's basic things that if we think about, we can understand and we can use in a practical manner, as well as creating an emotion, as well as in an artistic form. And I feel like those things, in my opinion, I feel like there is sometimes a group of people in those groups that will make things more complicated than they are. So it seems like it's more complex and harder to understand because they want it to be solely artistic. Or more artistic, or people to respect it as an art form. And I think something can be practical and still artistic at the same time. And that's how I feel about film and these kinds of shots and cuts and explanations. I feel like you don't have to use all these hard words and all these complex terms. It's at the end of the day, creating human emotion and creating stories and making it so people can connect with these stories through practical means. Does that make any sense?
Everything you just said is the way life is. I'm in the military, so and not only am I in the military, I'm in the United States Air Force. So we use different words for no reason. We don't call a bathroom a bathroom. We call it a latrine for no reason.
Never
Like,
heard that
just
in my
say,
life.
yeah, just call it a bathroom. But like when you go to boot camp, you better call it a latrine. We don't call it a cafeteria. We call it a chow hall, or or whatever else, whatever other big words the Air Force decides they want to use. So it's not just the film industry. It's just everywhere you go. I did a little review on the movie Uncharted, the video game, but
Oh, I
that
saw it. I
movie,
liked it.
yeah, that movie, if you watched it, not to spoil anything, but the one scene where the guy puts on the suit and he was like, well, you're wearing the suit, but you actually have to look like like you have money. Like, how do you look? You got the suit, but how do you look like you have money? You know what I mean? Because what Mark Wahlberg was saying was right. Like, you could have all the money. There's another aspect to it. Even though you have a lot of money, you're wearing the clothes, but do you carry yourself and present yourself as another upper class,
Yeah, and
thing?
I
And
feel like when it comes to art and stuff like that, people do want to feel like they're a part of something. The military too. They use different words so that they feel like they're a part of something bigger, or so they feel more like in the group. And I can understand that. but I also feel like there is an alienation of other people in these art forms, especially.
But you know, on that note, specifically speaking of the military, is they have to make it that way to make it seem valuable. So like my job in the military, like I tell people I'm a mechanic, but when they describe my job on the internet, it's like tactical aircraft maintenance or something really long and over exaggerated and stuff like that.
Professional sounding, yeah.
Yeah, to make it sound like something that it's way more. But when you look at if you look at my job on the internet, it looks like if I were to look at my job on the internet, not being in the military, I wouldn't even apply to it because I would think, look, I don't qualify for that because like, look at that. But
It's just
being
like
in the
how people
military,
view editing, right? In the
yeah,
film
I look
industry.
at it and I'm like, well, no, like even though it has all these terms and stuff, like I just applied for this marketing job. And it sounds like, oh, marketing, I don't know anything about marketing, but technically you'd be surprised about what a marketing job actually is. And I know the reason I applied to it is because I know a guy who works in this, he's offering me the job because he used to work the job. And all the job is they give you all their social media account passwords and stuff. And all you're doing is you're just logging in every day and you're making posts about their company to keep them relevant and doing little short videos and stuff. That is it. But it sounds it sounds really complex because they call it marketing. And if you read the description, it's like, you know, gotta be punctual and that's the other. But in actuality, all you're doing is just logging into this company's account and making posts all day
No,
long.
I'm studying
That is
PR
it.
right now, and it's basically just glorified secretary work for the most part. in the
Exactly.
beginning.
So yeah, like they have to be that way to kind of make it look, if they're not going to post it on there. I need somebody to control my social media accounts. They're not going to post that on there. That sounds kind of, you know, they're going to get all kinds of riffraff. They want somebody that's, you
Yeah,
know,
they're
that can,
trying to weed out people who are less committed.
And I can
exactly.
Right,
understand
yeah.
that in the film industry because a lot of people look down at things like editing and think it's less complicated than it is, or less or easier than it is, or more simple than it is. So there's an argument there. I just don't like, because it seems like you're alienating in artistic industries. I mean, like art and cinema and all this stuff. It just seems like people find pleasure in like complicating things, so it seems like they're more important than they are. Does that make sense?
It does, but they have to, because art isn't taken seriously. And in order
Yeah.
for it to be taken seriously, they have to make it look like it's something that it's not. So when you're asking for grants and loans and stuff, you're not going to ask for a loan to say, it's a difference between when you say, oh, I make movies or make videos versus, oh, I'm a content creator. Sounds way more professional, you know, or a media consultant sounds way more professional than, oh, I just shoot videos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're
you're gonna have to break art, which is something subjective, down into a metric if you want to have it intersect with business.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. In these explanations, it doesn't seem like they're taking the practical as much. They're trying to make it seem more artistic and complex. And that's what annoys me. It's like, if you want to make it seem more interesting, I understand. And in some parts it does that. And then in others, it goes into like this artistic philosophical lane that I'm like, does it need to be that in depth for this explanation? At least not always. And so I do feel like sometimes it can be
I
taken.
don't know that I agree with what you keep saying about making it, quote, more artistic. One, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that.
Oh, it was just, we watched a video about a guy breaking down a scene and using these terms. I forgot the movie, but it was, so he started going on to what emotions he thought they were provoking and what subliminal messages and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I feel like that's more how you interpret it, as opposed to what's technically the emotion that they're trying to capture.
Because I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think these terms like this can be, it seems like terms like this can be useful for people who want to be able to break something down into a repeatable process.
I can understand that. I can understand that.
Like,
I-
you know,
I think there's
when they
extremes to
say
everything.
when they say that something is more art than science, they're saying it's more imprecise than precise. And
Yeah.
if you want, like, if you're like part of a business and you need repeatable results, it's important to have some kind of like structure to do things around. And I also think that breaking things down into what you call, or making things more complex, I think that can be useful for people who don't and can't take an intuitive approach to these things, because like a lot of these things that they're talking about are things that a lot of people in the industry just understand intuitively.
That's fair.
So are
Yeah.
you supposed to like shut out the people who can't do this intuitively, or
Yeah, I
do you
get
want to
that.
make sure that this keeps, like, I don't know, that, like, I don't know, I just
No,
I
I
have
get what you
feelings
mean.
about like about like, oh, well, you know, if like, oh, we all understand these things, it's like, so
Oh,
some
I'm
people
sorry.
don't
That is not what I
understand these
meant. I am
things.
so sorry if that came off like that. I'm sorry if that came off like that. Then I'm the pretentious one right now. Um, no, I'm sorry, but I do completely understand where you're coming from. I guess it really depends on the way that your brain works. I think that I work better with more simple approaches because my brain can complicate things very easily. And I can very easily think that something is more complicated than it is if it's explained to me for too long or too complexly or too, you know, more breakdowns. That's how my brain understands things better. Because if it my brain already complicates things. So if I have too much of an explanation, I'll just get confused and muffled, and my head will be all over the place. So I think you're right. It definitely, I think there's a place for both ways. And sometimes it is important to break things down a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I guess like I'm just thinking of lots of examples when thinking about these terms, like for how to explain why a movie did not work. And it's like, wow, why didn't this work? It's like, oh, because they did not communicate, like they did not properly communicate the passage of time. Like suddenly it's months later and you don't realize that it's months later. That's temporal relation right there.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Like they did it
Yeah.
wrong.
Right. That is true.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I went on a tangent. I didn't mean to. I guess I was just trying to explain my train of thought. And like I said, I don't know how to break things down very well. And so I guess I was just trying to, and I over convoluted it and I over explained things. And that's why I like things broken down to me. Because I have a tendency of overthinking.
Yeah,
things.
no, and I totally agree. Like I guess it's just like too. I actually don't know where I'm going with this sentence.
No, but I totally understand what you mean. And I definitely agree with your argument. Like it's fair. I think, yeah, I really appreciate your perspective. It's really interesting. And it did make me think in a different way about it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know. I just I value using specific language when specific language is needed. So
I get
just
that.
to me, like anytime someone's trying to argue that like more specific words shouldn't exist, that is a problem to me.
Oh,
Like
I'm
I know
fine
you
if
weren't
they
necessarily
exist.
saying that,
Yeah, I get it.
but like when people are like, just use this word, like I get it. It really depends.
You like
It
options.
really depends
I get
on if this is about culture here. Like this is like what Brian was talking about with the military, you know, like it's about what words you use under different settings because you're entering a different culture.
Yeah, I get that. All right. Sorry, honey. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there. But I think it was an important I learned a lot from it, and I think it was a good conversation to have, at least for me.
Yeah, so that's why I was asking, like, what context do you use these words in? I guess, yeah, is how I was starting it.
Right. And I was saying, like, I would, like, in a normal, like, if you were my editor and we were trying to have a conversation, and these words wouldn't come up, and they probably wouldn't come up for any other production company you're working
I hope
for.
so.
Because they aren't really for the practical use, they might be, like you said, for more of a explanation as to why something didn't work, and then you can
Yeah.
point to these and then talk about that. So that is right. Like it's more of like a different way of looking at it from the after the movie's out, you're watching it, and then you're using these words to explain what is or isn't working or how they match something instead of just saying a match cut. Yeah, they did a match cut. You might be like, oh, that was really cool how they matched that image to this image, or they showed the contrast between these two images with the graphic relation. Um, you know, so, but with editing itself, like you're probably not going to run into these.
Yeah, it's not like these are words that you need to use. Like I guess in that way, I do understand what Priscilla's saying. Is that like there are some contexts where it's like you feel like you need to use these words in order to sound more professional.
Yeah.
When the more important thing is like just being able, just as long as everyone has agreed upon words that they use to mean specific things, that's
And everyone's
important thing.
understanding what everyone else is saying. Like that's the main thing. We all get each other. Okay, good.
Right.
So I think, I'd like to add the spatial relationship. They have the term called mise-en-scène.
Mhm.
And that basically has, from a composition perspective, right, from shot to shot, you may have the world in which the character is in. So I think if I understand this spatial relationship correctly, what it's saying is that when a cinematographer or a director, right, combination, they're doing a production run, so they have a mise-en-scène or maybe the world in which the character is. They shoot with that perspective in mind. So basically telling a story based on the objects which are there in the foreground, background, whatever, right? The lights, which is there in the foreground, background, but different different components of a composition, right? We may be there. So the spatial relationship, if I gather from what the statement is saying here, is that the editor, when they are actually doing the cut, they need to take that consideration of what the cinematographer or the director had in mind and keep that world in place to have a continuity of the story, or maybe have the same sense of the story with that composition which the director or the cinematographer had. I mean, it could mean different things. Like if you take pictures, right, or the artist rendition of some art, and you may look at that art and you may look at from a different perspective, and you come back again after 3 days, you look at the same art, you may look at from a different perspective. So your mood is essentially going to be defining how you perceive that picture. Likewise, the relationship between the editor and the cinematographer is going in such a way that that perception that you want to keep it as consistent as possible, rather than cinematography looking at the composition in a different sense than what the editor is looking at that composition in a different sense. So there could be a mismatch between the thinking. And I think that's what this spatial relationship is. I understand it the way it's been stated in this statement that you have on the screen. That's what I
see, the way I understand the spatial relations thing is just that it's just about the actual physical space within the scene, making sure that it's you can understand where things are. That's usually why we have that establishing shot, to show how far away the characters are from each other, to show what else is in the room, and to show that space. And then when we start cutting back and forth between the different characters, we understand that, why isn't he, they're getting ready to fight, why isn't he throwing his fist and punching at him? Well, because they showed us in the establishing shot, they gave us that spatial relation of showing us how far apart they are. Even though we're seeing close-ups of the two characters, we know that they aren't close enough yet to start fist fighting. And that's what I think the spatial relations is talking about, is like the actual understanding the space of the scene, where the
Right.
characters are in relation to each other, and where items are, or the door, or whatever the scene is in relation to the characters.
Right. So sometimes what happens is like you're going from sequence to sequence and you cut into a scene and you're so caught up in the tense moment or maybe an argument which is happening between the two characters. And you tend to completely, so some scenes may just start with an establishing shot, and some scenes may completely start with a sequence may just start with the two characters, fighting each other or ruling off, in some sort of argument or something. So
Right.
the editor is essentially going to be lost in the process. He's just basically not really paying attention to the spatial relationship. He's paying attention to the action which is happening between these two characters. And that can happen if the editor has not really, if the cinematographer has something in mind, he has the background, or maybe he has the composition in a certain way, which is completely ignored by the editor because he's more caught in the events or the actions rather than creating a world, the world of the character, which is also equally important.
Right.
So it could be that also, So establishing shot sometimes comes later on in the sequence, or maybe in the middle of the sequence, or sometimes it may completely be ignored. So that's their thing also. I think that's what look at how you were mentioning about the establishing shot. I think makes complete sense.
Mm-hmm. And it's just to make sure the audience, whoever's watching it, aren't going to get confused by where we are or where they are in relation to each other or anything. If we show somebody 7 feet away from a knife and all of a sudden their next shot they're picking it up, that's going to be a weird spatial relation because it's like, well, how did he get that? He's 7 feet away. So that's the way I'm looking at it. So you always want to be aware of that. And that's part of all of this is all part of continuity editing. It's like making sure the continuity all makes sense. And that's just making sure the spatial awareness of everybody makes sense from shot to shot, or it's not too much of an abrupt difference that the audience is going to notice and feel like they're watching a movie. You want the continuity editing. The main reason to have it is to get people just invested in the story and the film, and to feel like eventually just to start feeling like they're not even watching a movie, they're just part of that scene. But if they start noticing these things that are messing with the continuity, like now the cup of water is full when it was empty earlier, or that guy was standing up earlier, now he's sitting down in the next shot, or the characters were 8 feet apart and now they're punching each other and they haven't moved a step. All those different things will make it cut continuity, have a continuity error, and then make it more likely that the audience will be taking out of the story and start realizing again, oh yeah, this is a film and they just made a mistake, or something's off, something's weird, I don't know what, but maybe they went over that 180-degree line without noticing it. Now something's different because character A was looking to the right, but now character B is on the left of screen because they went to the other side of that 180-degree line. So all of this together is continuity editing and just making sure that the whole scene flows well together, time, space, whatever's happening in the image. And all of those things are working well together to make it flow and make it seem like one thing that was continuously shot. All right, we're going to move on from that and go into our last thing for tonight, which is credits. Credits, you can have opening credits or you can have end credits. For opening credits, there's a bit more of a structure compared to ending credits, but both of them have somewhat of a structure, and especially one that was beginning to be established over the years. If you are working with a union production or a union crew, or union actors or whatever, then you will have most likely in the contract where their name needs to appear and when. If you're getting big if you're getting big stars, or you're getting a nice big director or someone, one of those above the line people, in their contracts, they usually have when their name, how big it is, where it'll appear on screen, and all of that. So sometimes you'll have to put it in the opening credits before the title. You might see Michael Bay or Martin Scorsese or Anne Hathaway, or whoever's acting in the film, whoever's directing it. They might have it in their contract where their name will appear, how big the letters will be, what font, all these different things. So you always want to check those contracts to make sure that you're not going against anybody's contractually obligated credit and how they had it, when their name appears, and all of that. If they don't have that, then you kind of want to maybe follow an order so that the credits make sense, and it's just more like what most films do. On masterclass.com, I found the best way of them describing how to do it. Opening credits, it usually starts, you guys have probably seen this, it starts with the production company that has distributed it and the production company that made it. So you'll see Lionsgate, their logo, and their opening, their intro, or whatever you call that, where they show like the little scene of their logo, which they would be the distributor. That would be the first thing you see. The second thing you see is the production company that made the film. So it can be an independent production company, or it can be a studio, and they're the ones who actually filmed it. But the distributor could be the ones who either just distributed it, or they could be the ones who are also financially responsible for the film. So usually in opening credits, you'll see the distributor's logo, you'll see the production company's logo, the filmmaker, and that's when you might see like Martin Scorsese picture or Spike Lee or a big name up there, so that you get your audience is ready to expect that filmmaker's signature style. So, oh, Martin Scorsese, he makes films a lot like this. This is that. Then you'll see the film title, some of the cast, and this could happen during an opening scene. There could be somebody driving. It could be something that you don't really have to pay too much attention to, and they're just having an intro while they're showing some of the different names that are attached to this project and who made it. Cast, casting director, music composer, costume designer, associate producers, editor, production designer, director of photography, executive producers, writers, and then the director. So with opening credits, they go through the companies, and then they go through those names. And then when they get to like, what is it? After they get past the title and the cast, then it's just like a free for all of who needs to be in there and who doesn't. They start from least important to most important, of like the above the line people who made this thing happen, who put it all together, or whose name will mean something to the audience. So in an opening credit, you might start with the casting director, music composer, and all that. You might kick all those people out, just have the producers, writers, and director on there. It doesn't really need to have every single name. It just depends on what you want to do and how long you want that opening credits scene to be. But the director, the writers, the producers, those will be the last thing on that list. When in closing credits or end credits, you'll see that oppositely. You'll see once their names start to appear, the director comes first, and the writers, producers, and it goes backwards compared to this. And my assumption just from that is that whenever you have the end credits, people don't stay as long for those. They don't pay as much attention to those. So you want to have the director, the writers, and the producer's name there first, so that people read those before they leave. And with the opening credits, you want those names to be the last in the audience's head. If they're going to remember them at all, then you want those names to be last, so that they remember the director, the writer, the producers who made the film. And that's just my assumption on why it's ordered that way usually. Let me see something. Yeah, and then it starts the film, and then with closing credits, there's no real hard or fast rules, unless it's in somebody's contract. Some people will have specific things they need for their name to appear in the credits, and so they might have it that they need to have their own screen. They don't want to share the screen with anyone else while their names are going. They want to have it on their own. And then you might have one of those films that has specialized credits where you see each name come in one at a time with something that connects to the movie, or you might just have it come on a blank screen with the person's name. But it depends on, it depends on their contract and if that's a requirement or not. If their name needs to appear first, if their name needs to appear how big, and if their name needs to appear on its own in its own screen. But other than that, I mean, there's not really any like forced rules whenever you have end credits. Even if you have union, you'll have union might have certain rules they require, but most of them don't even have it. A lot of the times, if you have union, you have to put the people in the credits. Sometimes if you go on like IMDb and you see actors, or you see a director, or you see somebody who was a lighting technician on some film way back in the day, and that was one of their first projects, you might see in parentheses next to their name uncredited. And that's because for whatever reason, the project decided not to credit them, or maybe they requested not to be credited in the film because they didn't like how it turned out. Either way, it's not really a requirement to put people in the credits. It's just that you usually do. And in most, especially in like union agreements, they require you to do it. But in non-union, a company can decide not to put it in, but typically that's why they always include that. Like you'll get credit and food and pay this amount of pay, or no pay, but credit and food provided, because they don't have to give you credit. So if they tell you they're going to give you credit, then they do have to, which is why they usually add that. Typically speaking, though, you're going to get credit in whatever you work in. It's just something to know that they don't really necessarily have to put your name in the credits if they don't want to, depending on what you did or whatever.
I think so. I guess this thing would be on this is that if somebody is giving time on the film, right, they should be given the credit, because usually what happens is like in IMDb, you don't really have people who are associated with your film. They are usually the cast, the director, writer, editor, producer, right? Beyond that, and the cinematographer, right? So beyond that, IMDb doesn't really list, as far as I have checked IMDb listing. But the credit-wise, I think it could go both ways, right? Somebody doesn't want to be on the credits, then that's a different thing altogether.
Right.
But by default, let's say, for the person, by default, I think even if somebody has sort of fought during the production and, he kind of was let go, or maybe he took off without really completing it, even then you would give him credit because he did spend some time. And that, I think, works well because, you kind of have association with that person, no matter what direction, your relationship went. So it's kind of binding. And I feel that, one should give the credit no matter how small the role is.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Even the person is acting like a PA, getting coffee for the director or cinematographer, you still need to give him credit because it may not be directly related to the production or anything to do with filming, but he has done work to keep the director happy, or maybe done things to keep the cinematographer happy, or whoever it is, right? And he deserves to be in that credit. That's
Oh,
my
yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah,
And
no,
that's when you use a
I
nice
think
sounding
everybody,
name for
anybody who's
them.
done anything on the set or anything to help with the set or anything to do, like even that's why there's sometimes special thanks in the credits where they thank people who wouldn't necessarily be in the credits, but they're like, thanks this restaurant because you helped us out that day or you let us use that location for free or whatever. Um, I was just saying, like in IMDb, I've seen at least I know actors, especially in some of their roles when they're like a background character, sometimes they're just uncredited, even though they were in the scene, and you can actually go to the movie and see it and see, oh yeah, that's Natalie Portman or something, but she wasn't credited in this movie for whatever purpose or reason. You know, and so they don't necessarily have to credit people who don't have it in their contract or they haven't told that they're going to give credit to, but generally speaking, almost everything will give credit to everybody because that's just, I feel like that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times the independent film, people want to work because they get the credit. They may not be getting paid or they'll be doing voluntary work, but they want to really establish their resume so that they can. Especially, I think people who are starting off in the PA as PAs, right? They would like to see, sometimes like also in the union, they require you to have so many hours of because I remember shooting, and people would have me sign a piece of paper which said, they had spent so many hours. Evidently, when you apply for the union membership, they require you to have certain number of hours that you have to show. And these actually kind of go along with that. So, it kind of works out good for, all parties associated. So that's kind of good thing to give the credit, I think.
Right. Yeah. All right, but when we're talking about end credits, usually it's going to start with the above the line personnel first. These can be presented in what I was talking about earlier. They call them standalone cards. That's the name for it whenever they have their name alone in the screen and they're not sharing that space with anyone else. So the standalone cards would come in and you'd see one name after the next until the credits start to roll with all the rest of the names. And again, these usually go in reverse order of the opening credits. So you start with the director and then the writers, producer, executive producer. It's the exact opposite if we look at this, where the director comes in last and then the writers right before them, producers right before that. But then if we're in the end credits, we're going director first, writers first, producer first, third, and in order like that. Executive producer, director of photography, production designer, the editor, the composer, costume designer, visual effects supervisor, casting director, co-producers, then the major leading cast. A lot of it depends, but a lot of them you'll see with at least like the lead actors are typically on their own. They start out the credits with their name on their own card. Then we do like unit production manager, first assistant director, second assistant director, the full cast, and that's typically where somewhere around that area is where we start showing it. It might start at the unit production manager and then we start showing the credits roll. So usually after the standalone cards where it's one name after the next, we'll start seeing the credits roll with all of the rest of the names. And it usually picks up wherever the standalone cards left off with the production personnel, like unit production manager, first assistant director, second assistant director, and then going in order of the full cast list. In the cast list, if you notice in movies, they typically go in order by, some will go in order by how big the role was, how many lines did they have, how much screen time. Some will go in order of when they appeared in the film. So they'll go, whether it doesn't matter if they're the biggest actor or if they're the smallest actor, if it was woman in the background, or if it was like side character that said one line, if they came 2 minutes into the film, then their name will appear earlier than the rest. So again, it doesn't really have there's no really specific rules unless it's in a contract somewhere, but typically speaking with the end credits, it's just up to the production to decide what order to put the names in. And after the full cast, you start going into like the stunt departments, and then you start going to all the production departments like the grips, electric, sound, wardrobe, hair and makeup, and all the rest. And then you go into post-production departments, and you'll see bunches of names here, especially if you have a action film or a fantasy film or something that used a bunch of CGI, visual effects, and things like that. You will have names after names after names in these post-production departments. And typically on the larger films, you'll see different studios that handled it, different companies outsourcing all of this stuff to have additional names, second unit, all that stuff will come in and go through each name individually, depending on what department or what department they were in. And then you usually have the music credits, and that's for people that prepared the songs, that orchestrated them or edited them. You have the song titles with the who made it and everything. If you're using licensed music, you'll start seeing those credits with the name of the song and the name of the album, the company who owns it, whatever else, all those different things that are connected to that piece of music and that license. You'll see that all appear one after another. And usually, again, those will typically go in order of when they appeared in the film, so that if it appeared first, that song will list first in the credits, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Some films will show the credits, the music credits for the most popular song first and go in order from there. And others will show it in the order that it came into the movie. Then you have the caterer and craft services. If there's a second unit, that's when it goes down there, and then you show all that. And sometimes second units are very large, so it might be multiple departments again, or it might just be they shot one scene or they shot a few shots here and this. Sometimes a second unit will be filming the entire time the other unit is, if it's a multi-location shoot. So you might see a huge crap ton of names here as well. Then you have whoever created the title, your special thanks, and that can go to anybody that helped out with the film that wasn't necessarily in one of those other, doesn't deserve like one of those titles, like a producer or something, but they did help out with the film in some way. This is where if you crowdfund a film, or if you watch a film that was crowdfunded in some part, you will see all the names of the people who donated some money. Typically, you'll see it under special thanks. Thanks to all our patrons, or thanks to all of our Kickstarter crowdfunding, whatever you call that, the people who give money on Kickstarter. Here, thanks to you, and then listing all those names. And then you have logos for the guilds that are involved in the production, like the Writers Guild of America, WGA, Directors Guild of America, and all of those. Or any equipment makers and rental houses. So you might see Red, if they shot on a Red camera, or if they shot on an ARRI, you might see the ARRI logo here. The different kind of equipment that they used and the different unions that were involved with this production. You'll see their logos. But you typically, if you, those will be in the contracts. If you are using anybody from the WGA or DGA, they'll typically have it in their contract that you need to show their logo at the end or somewhere in their credits, the end credits. But if they're not, if you don't have that in the contract, then you probably don't want to put the logo in there, just because you might not have permission to use it. So it's actually more, you don't want to use it if you don't have to, pretty much, but you do want to use it if you have to, because you want to make sure not to leave it out if it's in a contract somewhere. But if it's not in a contract, it might be a copyright claim for their logo and say, hey, we don't want my logo in your thing, whether they were involved or not. Whether you shot with a Blackmagic camera or not, Blackmagic might not want to have their logo in your film at the end of the credits. So if that's not in the contract, you might not want to use that.
Interesting. You mentioned about the Kickstarter. So in the Kickstarter, when you're listing in the, I've not seen any credits with the Kickstarters, but if you do list it, you list all the people who have contributed, or is it, how does that go? That could be a
Yeah,
big
it's
list, right?
typically like they typically say, we'll put your name in the credits, and then they put it
Uh-huh.
in the special thanks. They say, thanks to all our Kickstarters, or
Oh, okay.
whatever, whatever they give the name for the people who donate. But then they
Okay.
actually name, they typically name the people who donated, like in order.
And you can put that in like 3 rows or 4.
Yeah, like you have to pause it to see everyone's name usually.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing which I wanted to add was the visual effects, right? That seems to be getting to be pretty universal all across the world, because there are so many people working on the visual effects.
Mhm.
And I see like the big movies, Bond movies or Matrix, you see this visual effects artist all across the world, being listed out there, which is kind of interesting. Before it used to be very localized here, to
Mhm.
maybe Hollywood or Vancouver or Atlanta, but now it seems like it's all over the world.
Right, like thanks to this state for this, thanks for that one, thanks for this country. And give thanks to all the locations that it was filmed at, which is next actually. And that would be where that is. And they might require you to use their logo, especially depending on if they're giving any, like if I shot a film in Virginia and it was an expensive film and I'm using their tax incentive program and everything, they might require me to use the Virginia is for Lovers logo, their little logo catchphrase thing in my credits. And so then if I filmed there and I also filmed in New York, then New York might require me to put theirs, whatever theirs is, and all of that.
Nice.
And then you have the location where the final sound mix was recorded. So it's like the company and the location of that. And then you have the copyright. You say like this is actually I don't know what the copyright is. I think it's like kind of a mixture of saying this is ours, don't use any pieces of this without our permission. And it's also saying that these logos and these other companies are their own companies. They're not us. They were just involved in this film or whatever. And that's what the copyright is. And then there's this disclaimer affirming that it's a fictional nature of the film, and no animals were harmed if there's animals in the movie. Those kind of disclaimers are right there. And that's usually where it wraps up. So you don't list somebody twice if they were doing multiple jobs. So if there was like a writer and a script supervisor, you typically combine them to say like writer / script supervisor and then their name. And you go in order of like how much they did on the set to make the film, in order of most important to least important, as in like this person was integral to making the film because there were these 3 different roles in one. And this person, they were integral as well, but they only did 2 roles, so they go below them. And then like that. So if you have people doing multiple jobs, you'll typically want to go in order of how much they did and how important it was to getting that thing done. As in like this thing couldn't be made without this person, and going in order of how much or how little they affected that. I was like, we could make it without them, but we're glad they were a part of it because they really helped, compared to we really couldn't have done it without this person because they did producer, director, writer, and they did the camera operation. So like, this thing wouldn't be made without that person, that kind of thing. B says, so whether it's ATL, above the line, or special thanks in the credits, that does not mean that IMDb will copy the same credits on their platform, as that may only be for the screen credit for main crew. Do I have that correct? Yeah, so for IMDb, excuse me, for IMDb, I don't think IMDb actually puts their own, they don't do it internally. the people who make films, somebody on the film set is going to be the one to fill out a what's it called? Basically an application to say, hey, we're making a film and these are the people working on it. And so then IMDb will post it on their site once they have all the information in. But the people making the film have to get everybody's name right and their job right and say whether the production is completely finished or whether it's still in production. And if it's a short film, it can't be put on their site until it's completely finished. I believe we learned that this past semester when we were talking about our short film. But with feature films, they're allowed to be put on the site while they're in development. So, but yeah, it's usually the people that are actually like saying, hey, we're making a film. And it's a requirement in a lot of different, especially like union and stuff, they have requirements in their contract saying, you're going to give me credit and you're going to put this on IMDb with credit. If it's like a director or somebody like that, where IMDb actually lists those credits. But that's
Awesome.
all I had.
I
Does
think
anybody have-
like from
Okay.
what I've learned, like credits, like at the end of the day, like you sound like a jerk, be like, oh, I need to be credited for my work. Well, it's not quite like that. It's more like the more you get credits for stuff, it's like it's part of like your resume. You know what I mean? Like on a lot of the stuff that you've worked on. It's
Oh,
just nice.
definitely. It's
be
like the
credited
proof
for
that
it.
says, yeah, I actually did work on this, you know, otherwise they don't know.
Yeah,
You
exactly. It's
do need
nice
that
to
proof.
have and be included and work and get to like work and get to do like the different positions that you get credited for and be thankful for your work and your contributions. It's nice, and thanking other people for their work and contributions is also really nice. So yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's anything like I've seen on lower budget productions, especially, they'll just thank anybody who did anything for them. And it's great because they do deserve some kind of credit. Thank you, mom, for doing this. You know, they'll put their name. Thank you, mom, for supporting us through this. Just because on the lower budget end, it's harder to get those things made. And so anybody who does anything, they're really appreciative of it and give them credit usually. Or anybody that helps, they typically want to have a credit. We'll help you, we'll give you $50, but we want to be associate producer or something. Okay, sure thing. You know, it doesn't really affect the film itself.
Yeah, the thing with IMDb is that there's no laws governing it. There's like really no way of proving, I don't think anybody would make things up, but like I mean, somebody could post some work with your name and then you can take it off, I guess.
Yeah, it's like Wikipedia. I have made additions to IMDb before, just as a regular person.
Yeah, I just recently just checked my IMDb and I was just like, oh, I don't remember doing like there's so much stuff I've done. Remember, and then some things are like, I'm kind of ashamed, not necessarily pornographic or anything, but I'm just like the productions I've done where it's like I don't even want to be associated with it. It was that bad.
Oh, really?
I feel some type of way, like maybe I should take my name off of it, but I don't want to offend them if I do.
I don't know. I've never felt that bad for like a short period of time. I felt that bad, but then I ended up realizing that it ended up just being misinformation. So then it went away. You know what I mean? Like something feels like it's a big deal, and then you're like, oh, I just didn't say that or understand that point. That makes sense. Never mind.
Well, no, I get what he means. Like, that's why I disassociated myself with my first YouTube videos, because like they were just so awful. I didn't want to have any connection to them anymore.
It's a pretty common experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want your best, like if someone's looking you up on IMDb, you want them to see the best things first, and for that stuff to show like, oh, they worked on some cool stuff. And if it's a big list but most of it's crap, then it might not, it's sort of like building your resume, and how you don't have to put every single job on your resume, but you try to put the highlights so that or adapt it to depending on where you're applying, so that they can see how you're qualified for that specific job, or the highlights of what you've worked on the most or what you're best at, and that kind of thing. I look at it like.
Well, that's good. Yeah, it's an interesting ride, like all the film stuff. It's like it's a super cool thing, and it's like it's awesome working on like every single show. I wouldn't say there's a single show I've ever worked on that I had a bad time on. It's just a matter of like, mm, you know, growing and just trying to like expand more, I guess, at the end of the day. I don't know, it's like weird. But yeah, crediting and stuff can be like difficult too for people. I think like if you just always, work with ethics and you always give credit where it's due and you solve all problems amicably and you do what's best for the production and the crew and the cast and whatever, then what's better than that? Then you, at the end of the day, everyone's like, wow, that was such an amazing time. I'm so glad that that happened and we worked on that.
Mhm.
And then
So
you
one
get
thing with the
something
credits is like usually on a set you will have something called a credit Bible, where the person it could be the unit production manager, it could be somebody else, are writing down everybody's name, what they did. That way you have everybody's name ready for post production when they're going to actually create the credits. And you don't have to go hunting down everybody. And you also want to make sure that the names, whether you are writing them down in that production, that credit Bible, or whether you are putting them into the actual end credits or beginning credits, opening credits, you want to make sure that the names are correct and that the job functions are correct. Because there's been times where they said like if you put somebody's name wrong, it's just like if you write their name, if you spell their name wrong, it just doesn't look good. So you want to make
Oh yeah,
sure that
you
you
can't
get
spell the names wrong because you want everything to look good at the end of the day and come together and be beautiful and perfect.
and you want to make sure you give them proper credit. So if you spell their name wrong or give them the wrong job function, then you're not really giving them the credit they deserve.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like, at the end of the day, it's nice to like, even if you did something small in it, it's nice to feel like your work's being seen or credited too, especially like, say you usually do like one job, but then you did like a part of like another job, but it like looks good. You get that credit, it's gonna help you get more in that line, I guess, if that makes sense too. So it's like a win-win. It's just like I guess it comes down to like just details at the end, how much you're willing to like sit down and look at everybody's roles and make sure that everyone's getting everything that they like, that everything's like done properly, written down properly on all that.
Yeah, because another thing that can happen is somebody might start out as maybe like a PA, but then later on they need them to do um, second assistant camera or something, and so then they actually take on a new role, and you want to make sure that you're giving the credit to the person, the higher credit, the second assistant camera, because that's a little bit of a higher up on the
Yeah,
tier than a
that's
PA.
exactly it. And then so then once they get that credit as second assistant camera, now it's going to be a lot easier for them to get another assistant camera job because they've already done one or done a couple. Still hard, but yeah, I guess if
Yeah,
that makes any sense. Like so it's so I think even like on the small things, it is important. And it just takes a little bit of diligence and thought. That's all. We do that and everybody's happy. Oh well, as happy as can be.
yeah.
And then like yeah, it's cool to be able to like yeah, working on all the little projects and shorts and stuff. It's super fun.
Mhm.
It's the best. Nothing
But
better. Hmm?
what?
I said there's nothing better.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, as far as credits go, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything else to add?
Yeah. I get you had went over opening credits, and when it comes to credits, it's a combination of organization and stylistic choice, I guess. I'm noticing that movies nowadays, especially the most anticipated ones, they don't really do opening credits anymore. They kind of just do all of it at the end. They have like a grand finale where that's where they're gonna make their mark and do the ending credit thing, and it's like a combination of like you won't even see, like nowadays, like you won't even see the title of the movie at the beginning anymore. You'll see all the way till you get to the end, and then boom, there's the name of the movie. Like at the end, you have to wait till the end to see the name, which is, to me, it's kind of like, I think that's kind of dumb because it's like if you pay for a movie, you go into a theater and you're like, what movie? And you're not necessarily sure what movie You know, because that does
I
happen.
usually see it at the beginning.
Yeah, but
No,
yeah, now
I think that now they're starting to do it where they have it at the end for a lot of movies. I think that's annoying too, especially when I'm trying to. I don't know. I just feel like imagine if it were just showing up, and I'd have to wait till the end to figure out what the movie was.
exactly. So they're doing the thing now, and now they're also doing the post-credit scenes now, where it's like you just can't go and leave. Like they want you to
Or
watch
mid-credit and post-credit.
I do think that that is a very smart way of getting people to actually read, like stay for the credits
You're
and
gonna
see
know.
the names, and maybe subliminally some of those names will be stuck in their minds.
Yeah, and then there's also the movies that have like the specialized credits, like,
the colorful ones, like the animated movies, where they have like little drawings and paintings.
Yeah.
I love it when they do that. I just think it's so cute. I do stay for the credits in those instances.
I had mentioned in a couple meetings ago, like we were talking about fonts and stuff, I believe. And I had mentioned that, this, like I said, this is kind of like the make or break, because I had this one conversation with another classmate of mine when I was still in film school, because like that's what I would do. Like I would focus a lot on the credits. But the thing is with me, like when you're a film student, like I said, like I'm used to doing a lot of stuff. So I would have to put my name for multiple tasks, just like directed by, edited by, shot by, edited. And my teachers would laugh. They'd be like, "You don't have to go and do all that." And I was like, "Yeah, I know." I had fun doing it. And then I got into a debate with another student. They're like, "Oh, you don't need to do all that." And I was like, "Well, I do." They were like, "Well, why not?" Well, first of all, when I was in film school, like by doing the credits, it was showing the teacher, like who, because they put you in groups, and not everybody does their fair share of work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's when you can really stick it to them, is when you put your name like 8 times in there.
one thing about it, and then another thing, like this is kind of like the make or break. So I was like, you do all this work to make the lighting good, the sound good, and then at the end the credits look like a fifth grader did it. It's just like, what is the point? This is like the make or break. People are like, you gotta, if you're trying to sell something and make it look as big budget as it is, even though you're not big budget, there are things that are gonna like expose you. So like you do all this work, you make the credit. And I see this all the time in YouTube videos where it's like, man, the lighting's good, the sound is good. And then you get to the credits and you're like, oh, well, this is low budget because of the, like you just gave yourself away, because no high budget film is going to like have credits to look like. And it doesn't have to be like this top tier stuff or anything like that. But like, especially, and I really hate when people don't even, like they use the first font that comes up when they put the text in, like what is it, the first one that comes up, the Arial black, and it's like you didn't even take the time to find like a font that fit the theme of the movie. You just went ahead and just used whatever.
Yeah.
Like, this is your time to like tell people who you are, even though like it's just text, but still like. That was his thing, like, oh man, it's just text. And I was like, no, that stuff is kind of important. Like it's one of those small, minute details that kind of like make the biggest difference. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you spend all that time making the film look good, and then at the end, it's just like, oh, you know what I mean? So like this is kind of like one of those things where it's like you want to take your time and give it, thought. And you had mentioned the opening credits. Like I'm coming from an era like the 80s and 90s. They'll do opening. There's like different variations.
Oh, there were long opening credits in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, they'd have an entire like
And honestly,
3
I
minutes,
think
5 minute scene of just
You're
driving through
talking
just
about
the
the 80s
city.
and 90s? Did anyone forget the 1950s with the Wizard of Oz and that?
Oh no, I mean like the further back you go, the longer they are, because people's attention spans have changed over time.
Right.
Yeah, it's scary. Like Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite movies, and when I watch it and I see how long the credits were, and they were in the beginning, I'm just like, holy crap! People used to sit and wait and read, possibly.
People read a lot before.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how many
It is.
people are like? Do you know how many people nowadays are like, yeah, I stopped reading after high school.
No, I love to read. It's just interesting. Like on the screen, I can barely read the words anyway. So it's just one of those things that, like, well, my face is not on in front of it, so I can't see it. But it's just one of those things that I was like, wow, people would sit. Like, I like reading a book, a story. But people complain all the time when you read the Bible and you have those genealogical trees and so and so, son of so and so, son and so and so. But they were okay sitting down in a theater for possibly 10 to 20 minutes and just waiting while the words and reading the names of everyone that worked on it, waiting for the movie to begin. That is commitment.
Usually music, wasn't there?
I mean, yeah, but it was more like instrumental.
People like
Oh.
instrumental.
yeah, you say instrumental. Like, oh, how boring.
Instrumental in the sense of, like, you weren't listening to the words, you were listening to the melody, and so your mind could wander, or your mind was there reading the credits. But you were watching a movie, so you were excited for it to begin, so you were waiting, and you're like, okay, yeah, so-and-so directed, so-and-so, yeah, people, actors, yes. And back then they cared about who was in the movie, like the actors and stuff like that. They're like, oh, she's in this movie, I didn't know. And so they would actually be reading it, I would assume, and waiting for it to begin. I just feel like that is an extra level of commitment that a lot of us are not willing to put nowadays.
Well, also there was less films coming
Yeah.
out, so it was like, whoa, a film,
That too. I feel like
Yeah, films were still like, they were novel, and people also didn't, not only that there weren't that many, but people didn't go as often.
Right. It was more like maybe like a 6 month to a yearly thing, special occasion. Let's go see a film. It's really, let's go do this thing that we don't usually do. But now we just watch movies all the time at home. So like going to the movies is
Yeah, and the at-home experience is very different from being in a theater. Like I have a way more patience when I'm sitting in a theater than if I'm watching
Me
something
too.
in my own home.
I have to notice that, me too, because you don't have the ability to like speed through it. And also, I don't know what it is about a theater, but you just feel more engaged in the story when you're there. It's more like an experience.
They turn all the lights down. They cut out all distractions.
Yeah, and so you're just more in it, and you don't notice how much
also
time
the speakers and the
actually
sound are all around you, so you feel way more like you're in.
you feel more immersed in it. Yeah. Because I remember, I don't know which movie I was watching, but I think it was The Chronicles of Narnia, and there was a scene that was extra long, and I was like, was it this long when I went to watch it in theaters? Like, I did not, and it was like, maybe they cut it for the DVD release or something, but it was long, and I was like, I don't remember it being this long when I watched it. That's interesting.
But yeah,
Go ahead.
opening credits add or take away from the production, because now you have to have a discussion of whether or not you were going to do an opening sequence or not. I think there's a whole department dedicated towards it, or you could just I said towards it, so like it could either be, especially specifically in lower budget, when I edit, it's like, well, how am I going to do this? Am I going to do an opening sequence, or am I just going to roll into it? And it really all depends on how much footage you have and how you do it. You could do it the traditional, the black screen with the names, and that's it. That's your opening sequence. That's boring. A lot of people will take stock footage and they'll put the credits over the stock footage and stuff like that.
I actually like it more like that, because at least there's something pretty to look at, and something cool to look
Yeah, and there's
at.
also the ones that will like Zombieland, I think, was one of the movies that had opening credits, but they attached it to the different things or the different actions.
Yeah, like I miss when they're like fun musical sequences. Like Legally Blonde had great opening credits with
Yes,
the
they did. It was so
yeah
good. I
with
was
this
looking
and
at it.
it was establishing character. Like it was
Yes.
showing you all these things in her room and how she does her morning routine as
And
like
her
they're
le- and her
delivering a
letter
letter.
coming, and
Yeah.
the girl signing her birthday card and like showing her sorority. It was so cute, and it was such a great, because V wrote something in the message about like an early 2000s movie where they would have actors cracking jokes and doing voiceover during the credits and interesting graphics. And I was trying to remember which movie had that. I remember there was a movie that was cracking jokes during the credits, like they had the actors, but they also had like funny things written in the credits, but I can't for the life of me remember the name of the movie.
I do
Well,
remember there was
also,
some
when
movie
we
that
saw the
like they were
disaster-
changing the credits to make it more like silly or whatever. They were like changing people's names on purpose after they gave
I think-
them.
Oh yeah,
I'm
totally.
pretty sure Deadpool did that. Deadpool.
No, Deadpool did it like a guy that filmed this or something. Like they did a joke. Like they
I
didn't show
know, but it
anybody's
was
real
still-
name. They just showed like jokes all together.
It was still
Oh.
that they did that. They took like the opening credits and they're like directed by some guy, acted by some hunk or something like that, and it was really fun. But I remember like the Alice in Wonderland. Its opening sequence is beautiful. Like it's such a beautiful animation, and there's a lot of writing, but there's beautiful music and beautiful colors, and you see like art from the original book, I think, and it was just really
Nice.
cool.
Yep. Yeah, and you know, I get why a lot of people don't do that because like that's a lot of effort. Like, but even though I really like it.
Me too. I remember the
They
ending
make
of
those.
World was really cool with the artwork, and the ending of Lilo and Stitch had like little pictures of them growing up together over the years, and I thought that was really cute. I think Encanto had something similar.
Yeah,
was-
a lot of stuff is like leftover stuff that they have, but sometimes a lot where I'm getting at is like a lot of it is discussed, like the opening credit. Have you guys seen the movie Lost Boys?
What?
Lost Boys? Have
No.
you seen?
Lost Boys. Wait, is that the Neverland one?
No, it's the vampire one.
Oh, then no.
Yeah, so their opening credit was kind of like it was a traditional. They had I believe it was a helicopter shot, but they do this a lot in a lot of horror films. Like I think I Know What You Did Last Summer did it too, I believe. Where it's like it opened up and like you're in the air and you're over this helicopter. Oh, I guess they're doing a helicopter shot and the camera's pointing down towards the ocean, and then they'll have the directed by this star and this person, this that, and then when they're finished with all that shit, then they'll land, then you'll see the beach, and then they'll get to the road, and then they'll just zoom in on this car, and then now we're into the movie. But that's a part of the sequence. But they obviously discussed it, like we're gonna film the water, and then we're gonna have our credit sequence there, and then move into the movie from that point. That's
Do you guys remember those credit scenes in early 2000s movies that were filmed in like San Francisco or New York that had the same exact stock footage? I swear I remember like at least 3 movies from the 2000s that I don't know if I'm remembering wrong or if they just couldn't find creative ways of getting shots of San Francisco, but I swear it felt like I was watching the same stock footage for 3 different movies, but it was the same image.
But yeah, what Brian's talking about is like they do the sequence to lead up to the first scene. I've also seen that same technique used where they go in through a window. They'll start out like in the city or in the state or something, and they'll show like what it's basically like in a giant establishing shot of where they are. And then they just keep like zooming in closer and closer with the camera until they get to the house, to the window, and then they go in through the window, and now we're in the first scene.
Or you do like 90s kids movies where it starts you off, you're in the clouds, and then they'll do the credit sequence in the clouds, and then it'll come down and it'll be like one of those Google, the Google Maps where you're zooming back down to Earth and stuff like that. You zoom into the scene you're starting in, and they that's a traditional one as well.
Right.
Yeah, you can be really creative with it. Like I think Napoleon Dynamite, the opening credits where they were just spelling things out like with condiments on food.
I can't remember it. Now I got all
I don't
this
remember that movie.
Aw.
I kind of miss when they used to put effort into the opening credit. Now they're
Yeah,
doing it in
and like did it? I don't know if anyone saw the movie Rat Race. I think that was early
Yes,
2000s.
I love that
Yeah,
movie.
it had those. It had the like it had a little animation in the beginning where they just took photos. They just took like photos of the actors' heads and put them on little cartoon
Yeah, I remember
bodies.
that. Man, that is one of my
Or
guilty.
like they did. I know there's also the what is that movie called? Where it's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where it just starts out with a random animation of them.
Yeah, that is one thing that when I was a kid, that would happen a lot, and then I'd immediately lose interest once it stopped being animation.
Yeah,
Once it
Rat
was
Race
live
is-
action, you're done.
I
Yeah.
still can't believe you. I can't believe you know that movie. I know no one knows that movie. I found that movie at a Walmart dollar bin when I was 7, and I watched it with my
Rat
dad.
Race.
And no one.
Yeah, my family quotes it all the time.
No one I know knows that movie. You're like the only other person on planet Earth that, other than me, that knows that movie.
That's so funny because there's so many like big name actors in there.
Right?
You know,
That's what I always
Mr.
thought.
Bean and John Cleese with his weird fake teeth.
Yeah, and that guy from Cheaper by the Dozen, I think, was there too. Or am I thinking of another movie? I think he was there for like a scene.
Not the dad of Cheaper by the Dozen.
Not the dad, but there was like one of the actors that was in there was there as well, or something like that. And that fat guy that I always forget the name, the dad of the kids.
Yeah. I also don't remember his name.
I always forget, but I know he's in a lot of animated films because he does a lot of voiceover work.
Yeah, I will say some of it. I did watch it recently. Some of it has not aged well.
Well, I can imagine. I only watched it for Smash Mouth because I heard Smash Mouth was in it.
Yeah, Yeah, that's the lesser known song where Smash Mouth plays at the end.
All right. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Talking about a very particular movie right now that I don't.
Yeah. But just that there's lots of ways that you can do opening credits.
Yeah, and it was a really cool creative way because it was also like hinting at what was going to happen in the movie.
Yeah, and so like I think like Brian was saying is like if you're doing opening credits, you want to think about it beforehand and not just the stock footage thing. Like Priscilla was saying, it's the most boring way of doing it. It's just showing like, okay, we are setting the location, I guess, but it's not really doing anything else for the film besides saying, yeah, we're in San Francisco or yeah, we're in New York, when they're just showing stock footage of the city. But if you do it in a more creative way, it can hold more interest, especially if it's more geared toward the actual film.
Yeah, it's about
example that
establishing the
Brian
tone.
used, like it wasn't exactly like having to do with, the only thing that it had to do with is showing the city and then showing the car. Pretty much that didn't really have to do with the rest of the film. Same thing if they just go in through the house. It's just
Do you
showing
think
where they
that-
are.
Do you think that
I
one
think
of the
it's
reasons they don't do that anymore is because now we kind of already know the movie we're watching more often than not? Like back in the day, you used to turn on the TV and the movie would be there. And so they would do the beginning credit scene so you could know who was in it right off the bat and you could be engaged by it right off the bat and figure out what the movie was. And then slowly, because I remember vividly as a child, us watching TV and a movie coming on in the credits and us trying to guess, okay, what kind of movie is this? Or wondering what movie it was. And I wonder if because you don't need to do that anymore, they're like, oh, we don't need as much.
I think it's just because it's
Like-
attention spans are less. People just want to get right into the action.
You do make an interesting point though, Priscilla. Like I think I will say that like trailers are a lot easier to access now, and that is where a lot of the promotional
Oh yeah.
material goes. So like I think that's a believable like it definitely is attention, but I think that is a believable other reason, because people can just watch the trailer for things as many times as they want, and usually they do before they go into it, so they already know what it's about.
Or they're pressing it on a Netflix or HBO Max, or they've already read the summary and already kind of know what it's about.
No, I mean
Yeah,
I've
I guess.
been in the theaters before, because the movie theater, my local theater, they for some reason they took off the when you're walking down the aisle, you can see what movie. Oh, this movie. They took the names off the movie, So it was only theater 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And the guy at the end who'll tell you you're theater 11, but they took the name off of it, I guess, to keep people.
Oh yeah, that is absolutely I've worked in a movie theater, and that is absolutely to discourage people from just walking in without a ticket.
Yeah. So
Really, I would do that just for fun as a kid.
That
if
makes
the movie
sense.
sucked. I would just go into another one and see what it was.
yeah, I have walked into the wrong theater, and I was like, "Isn't this movie supposed to have such and such in it?" And didn't see it, and I was like, "So."
That's why you keep your ticket. You keep your ticket. You look at it.
And without the credits, you don't know until it like you're 20 minutes in, and
That's
you're like,
true.
this isn't the movie I paid for.
And then you miss the other
But that's
movie.
true. If there's no credits, like, why?
Right.
Yeah.
But all right. Moving on. Well, actually ending. The last thing I was going to mention is that we have our 3 exercises on Monday. So anyone who's wanting to take part in that, they're due Monday. We're going to go over them Monday. So if you want to have yours seen and reviewed and talked about on Monday, do them by then. And then also on Monday, besides just going over that, we are going to be talking about how long are scenes, and we're going to be looking at the lengths of scenes. Brian's always talking about this, and it's something really important to think about is how long do you want to make your scenes when you are writing it? How long do you want to make your scenes when you are editing? You know, and average length of scenes, as well as like how long do they usually extend to, and how short can they usually get? So we'll be like checking that out. And if I don't find the information I want, I'll actually check on movies themselves just to see how long each scene is, because they break them down into scenes and you can see how many there are and all that. So it's pretty easy. Then we're going to be talking about walkie-talkies, what to look for in walkie-talkies for your set, which ones are best for film, and then the brands, which are right here, Motorola and Midland. And editing speed. And if we already sort of talked about this, if there's more information, we'll discuss that as well. But it's like speed ramps, slowing down stuff, doing freeze frames, and how to do that stuff, and when and why you might want to do it. So anyone have any questions, comments, or anything else to add before we end the recording?
I have a last question for the group, but it doesn't need to be recorded.
All right. So I'll stop right there then.